In the middle of it, Paul whispered in my ear, "We have to end this." Then he got even rougher, more violent. When he was finished, he pulled open the door and saw him. The man he'd been dreaming of, his one true love. Paul panicked. Coddling his precious boy, he pointed at me and said, "It was all him. He's the one who's always clinging to me. I only did it because he looks so much like you. I was pretending he was you, that's why." I ignored Paul and looked at the man standing outside the door. He was tall and slender, dressed in a perfectly tailored cream-colored trench coat. He had an air of natural-born nobility and aloofness. He looked about 60 or 70% like me, but he definitely wasn't as handsome. Not his eyes, not his nose, not his mouth. None of it came close to mine. With looks like that, he wouldn't even qualify to get coffee for a pop idol with god-tier visuals like me. He saw me, disheveled and humiliated inside the room, then glanced at Paul's rumpled, damp shirt. His handsome brows arched slightly, and the corner of his mouth curved into a knowing, playful smile. "TSK, looks like I came at a bad time? Did I interrupt official business?" Julian's voice was clear and pleasant, like pearls dropping onto a jade plate, but it carried an icy chill. But what a poser. Would it kill him to talk normally? He had to put on that fake, airy voice. A flash of panic crossed Paul's face. He instinctively blocked the doorway, trying to shield me from Julian's gaze. His voice was laced with a tenderness and anxiety I'd never heard before, almost bordering on groveling. "Julian, what are you doing here? You're not interrupting." "Not at all. We were just..." He stammered on "we were just," but couldn't finish the sentence. Was he going to say, "We just finished," and I was about to dispose of the cheap imitation? Julian's gaze passed over Paul's shoulder and landed squarely on me. It was a calm, placid look, but it held a top-down condescension, as if he were looking at an unsightly piece of trash. "And who is this?" He was playing dumb, his tone as flat as if he were discussing the weather. Paul's body tensed. He whipped his head around, his eyes filled with warning, disgust, and a desperate need to cut me off. That look was colder and more hurtful than when he'd said, "We have to end this. Nobody important. Julian, go wait for me in the living room. I'll take care of this. It'll just be a minute." The words flew out of Paul's mouth, cold and clipped. "Nobody important. Take care of this." I leaned against the cold stone counter, watching the perfect couple by the door. Paul was carefully shielding Julian like a priceless, long-lost treasure. His eyes were focused and intense, with a warmth I had never been given. Julian watched with a mix of pity and mockery, as if enjoying a show. And me? I was naked, a complete mess, like a clown caught in the act, waiting to be taken care of. The dead ice around my heart was instantly set ablaze by a massive wave of humiliation and hatred. It burned so hot my insides ached. It turned out that ending the relationship wasn't the most painful part. The most painful part was that as he announced our end, the man he'd been dreaming of was standing right outside the door, listening. And I, the knockoff, had become the most sordid backdrop for their long-awaited reunion. "Paul, Julian, you two bastards. Fine. Reunite all you want. Get back together. Fall in love again. But did you have to drag me into it?" I raised a hand and fiercely wiped away the liquid on my face. I couldn't tell if it was water or tears. Half an hour ago, I had just finished a concert. Without even taking off my makeup or having a sip of water, I was dragged back here by Paul. The moment we walked through the door, he rushed me into the bathroom. I was forced against the cold, black marble countertop. My expensive stage costume was ripped to shreds, hanging precariously from my waist. Paul's body was heavy and burning hot, his thrust so fierce it felt like he was trying to shatter my bones. The faucet wasn't turned off completely. The sound of dripping water echoed in the porcelain sink, mixing with my own suppressed, broken. The air was thick with his signature scent of cold cedar. His fingertips dug into my waist, branding me with deep red marks like a hot iron. Paul's searing lips pressed against my sweaty ear, and at his peak moment of pleasure, he uttered those words. "We have to end this. I don't want Julian to get the wrong idea. My gaze turned cold bit by bit. Mr. A. Lister, you don't have to trouble yourself with taking care of things. My voice was surprisingly calm, even carrying a hint of a cold smile as it echoed through the silent bathroom. In front of them, I slowly, deliberately, picked up my ruined clothes from the floor and barely managed to cover myself. My movements were steady. My fingers didn't tremble once. Finally, I looked up at the two frozen figures in the doorway. My gaze swept past Paul's panicked face and settled on Julian's amused eyes. I wish you two a lifetime of misery together. May you share the same coffin 100 years from now, and please, for the love of God, never disgust me again. I ignored Paul's instantly ashen face and the flash of darkness in Julian's eyes. I straightened my back, like a soldier crawling out of a battlefield. A mess, but with eyes as sharp as a blade. Step by step, steady. I walked past them, out of this disgusting bathroom that had buried 6 years of my foolish devotion. Behind me, I heard Paul's frantic explanation. Julian, don't misunderstand, he's just trash, The water in the bathroom was still dripping. Drip, 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 like the final countdown of a ridiculous farce. Paul, Julian, the game isn't over. It's just my turn to be the hunter. On the set of the live show Starlight, the massive, circular studio was brightly lit and buzzing with noise. Below the stage, fans waved glowing signs, and on stage, the glamorous guests chatted and laughed. I sat at the very edge, an out-of-place background decoration. Only 2 weeks had passed since that humiliation in the bathroom. Paul's team, like a virus cleanup crew, had swiftly erased every public trace of our connection. Terminating my contract, moving me out, changing my contact info, it all happened with a chilling efficiency. And to think, he was the one who relentlessly pursued me, who announced to the whole world that I was his. Back then, I was a nobody who had just stepped into the industry, unable to even land a bit part. He was a superstar actor. He gave me resources, paved the way for me in every way possible. His public declaration of our relationship sparked outrage among his fans, who called me a seductive slut. He got angry and personally fought with the haters on his main account. He was the one who turned me gay, and now he was calling me trash. But what he didn't know was that the only reason he became a superstar actor was because I was the one bankrolling his career. Julian made a high-profile comeback, occupying all of Paul's time and attention. The entertainment headlines were all superstar Paul Grant on intimate trip with mysterious scion Julian and a triumphant reunion, true love conquers all. And I, Asher, a top-tier idol just 2 weeks ago, was now the laughingstock of the industry, a knockoff who tried to climb the social ladder, only to be slapped down by the return of the real thing. My manager hadn't wanted me to take this show. He said I had too many haters right now, and appearing on a program with Paul and Julian would just get me ripped to shreds. He thought I should lie low. I'm not a turtle. Why should I hide? I was going. The spotlights were hot. The fan signs for Paul in the audience made my eyes burn. He and Julian sat in the main guest seats at the center of the stage, their intimacy natural and effortless. Paul leaned in to whisper something to Julian, a genuine, gentle smile on his face that I had never seen before. Julian would nod slightly, poised and graceful. Occasionally, his eyes would sweep across the audience, and when they landed on me, they held a faint, almost imperceptible pity, like he was looking at an ant. The host enthusiastically moved things along, starting a classic game of Pictionary. The guests were split into pairs. All right, let's have our award-winning actor Paul and Mr. Julian team up. As soon as the host finished, the crowd erupted in deafening screams. Paul stood up naturally, and Julian rose elegantly. They walked to the front of the stage, perfectly in sync. Then the host, deliberately stirring up trouble, let his gaze wander over the remaining guests before landing on me with a malicious grin. Oh dear, it looks like Asher is all alone. How about this? Let's have Asher join Paul and Julian's team. A group of 3 will be much more interesting. I'm sure you won't mind, will you, Asher? The audience instantly went into an uproar. Hisses and sharp jeers of shameless and clout chaser filled the air. The director knew what he was doing and immediately zoomed the camera in on my face. I clenched my fists under the table, then released them. I knew it was a trap, but I didn't care. The show had offered me an astronomical fee to be here. They didn't ask for much, just that I cooperate and be a background prop. Why wouldn't I take the opportunity to make money off these two scumbags? I even managed a professional, flawless smile. Of course, Paul's face instantly darkened. His eyes held undisguised annoyance and warning, along with something else I couldn't quite read. Guilt? Julian, on the other hand, just raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk on his lips, as if he were settling in to watch a good show. The game began. Julian drew the card and was responsible for acting it out. Paul was responsible for guessing. The first phrase, Swan Lake. Julian gracefully performed a few ballet moves. He looked quite the part, his aura exceptional. Paul watched him with rapt attention and answered almost instantly. Swan Lake. The ballet Swan Lake. His voice was full of excitement and admiration. The crowd screamed again. Ah! Paul knows Julian so well. Perfect chemistry. Julian got cocky and started dancing again. He even danced toward me. I dodged to the side. He danced over again and fell at my feet. Was it Christmas already? Was he giving me an early New Year's bow? Before I could even react, a large hand shoved me away. Then came the yelling. Asher, I thought you were just incompetent and unfocused. But now I see you're rotten to the core. You're so malicious you dare to harm someone in front of a live audience and all these fans? He was practically shouting, his voice booming through the microphone and filling the entire studio. His cold rebuke was like a public slap in the face. The audience fell silent for a moment. Then came an even bigger uproar of jeers and insults. The live stream chat exploded. WTF. Paul is furious. That snake Asher is definitely up to something. Stop chasing clout, you leech. Get off the stage. I feel so bad for Julian, having to deal with such a lowlife. Get Asher out of Hollywood. He probably used some dirty tricks to crawl into the superstar's bed. And now that the real one is back, he dares to try and ruin things for the happy couple? He should be struck by lightning. The dense barrage of hateful comments was like a cold tide, instantly drowning me. Even though I didn't really have feelings for Paul anymore, reading those words still made my heart feel like it was being torn apart by countless hands, until it was just numb with pain. After all, this was someone I'd loved since I was a kid. I never would have imagined that the person I had adored, the person I had tried so hard to get close to, was actually rotten all along. If I had known, I never would have followed him into the entertainment industry. When Julian fell just now, Paul's line of sight was perfectly clear. He saw that Julian had fallen on purpose. But even knowing that, Paul still protected him, still chose to scream at me like that in front of a national audience. You could be so vicious on a live broadcast in front of everyone. A person with such a debased character doesn't deserve to be on this stage. You don't deserve to be in this industry. Now get on your knees and apologize to Julian. Debased character. Vicious. Don't deserve to be in this industry. Get on your knees and apologize? Every word was like a red-hot poker searing my heart. It was as if they were telling me to stop being so blind. The boos and insults from the crowd swallowed me like a tsunami. The director's camera was a cold gun barrel, capturing every inch of my pale, broken expression. I looked at him, at his handsome face that seemed so righteous as he defended justice and protected Julian. The dead place in my heart stopped bleeding. All that was left was ice. Paul, for the sake of your one true love, you put the knife to my throat yourself. Paul, we really should be over. My vision went dark, and I almost collapsed. Just then, the side door of the studio was silently pushed open. A tall, imposing figure stepped in, silhouetted against the light from the backstage hallway. He was wearing a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, no tie, with the top button of his shirt undone, revealing the pale skin of his throat. His posture was relaxed, yet he carried an innate, powerful presence that was impossible to ignore, like an elegant and dangerous panther, silently stepping into a chaotic hunting ground. It was Troy Vance. His gaze cut through the chaotic crowd and landed precisely on me, the teetering, condemned figure at the center of the stage. Then, under the astonished stares of everyone and the frantic focus of the live cameras, Troy strode forward, ignoring Paul and Julian on the stage, ignoring the uproar from the audience, and walked directly to me. He lowered his head slightly, his deep eyes looking at me. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through all the noise, carrying an undeniable sense of comfort and absolute control. TSK, how did you let yourself get into such a mess? This pathetic game is beneath you. I'm taking you home. The noise of the studio was shut out by the heavy car door. Paul leaned back against the cold leather seat of the Rolls-Royce, a raging fire in his chest mixed with a flicker of panic, a feeling he refused to acknowledge. Troy Vance, that black sheep of the Vance family. How did he know Asher? And what right did he have to protect Asher like that? That line, "This pathetic game is beneath you," felt like a poisoned whip lashing across his face. In front of millions of viewers, it had ground his superstar dignity into the mud. He was an A-list actor, a superstar. How could a game he graced with his presence be pathetic? What bothered him even more was that when Troy took Asher away, Asher hadn't given him a single glance. It was as if Paul Grant had become completely irrelevant to him. "Paul, are you okay?" Julian's concerned voice sounded beside him, soft with worry. Paul snapped back to reality. Looking at Julian's refined, handsome face, the irritation in his heart subsided slightly. He forced a smile and took Julian's hand. "I'm fine. Just disgusted by some stray dog. Don't worry." He deliberately ignored the unease that had settled in his gut when Asher was led away. The car drove toward Paul's penthouse in the heart of the city. Along the way, Julian tactfully avoided mentioning the live show, chatting instead about trivial, pleasant things. Paul answered distractedly, his eyes involuntarily glancing at his silent phone. No calls. No texts. Asher had made no move since being taken away by Troy Vance. This was not normal. In the past, no matter how angry Paul got, Asher would always timidly, like a guilty puppy, try to make up for it in any way he could. He'd send apologetic texts or buy him his favorite things. Paul's fingers unconsciously swiped across his phone screen. A strange sense of irritation and the emptiness of losing control gripped him. He opened the chat window with Asher, a conversation he had almost forgotten. The last message from 2 weeks ago was his own cold command. "Pack up your things and get out." Paul's finger hovered over the screen for a few seconds. Then, driven by an almost obsessive impulse he couldn't understand himself, he typed and sent a new message. The usual spot. "Sweet tofu pudding. Bring it over now." This was what he always made Asher buy whenever he was in a bad mood. That little, unassuming shop on the west side was over an hour's drive, round trip. In the past, no matter how late it was or what Asher was doing, as soon as he gave the order, Asher would show up, panting, with the cool tofu pudding, his eyes shining as he looked at Paul with a cautious, eager-to-please expression. He loved tormenting Asher. Every time he saw Asher groveling for his approval, it made him happy. Message sent. Paul stared at his phone screen like a predator waiting for its prey. A voice screamed in his mind. "See, Asher, you can't leave me, even if you've latched onto Troy Vance. All I have to do is crook my finger, and you'll come crawling back like the dog you are." The minutes ticked by. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Half an hour. The phone screen remained black. No reply. No typing. Indicator. The irritation grew stronger, like a million ants gnawing at his heart. Paul suddenly slammed his phone onto the seat beside him. "What's wrong, Paul?" Julian asked, startled. "Nothing." Paul's tone was harsh, his face so dark it looked like it could drip ink. The car finally pulled into the underground garage. Paul got out, still fuming. Julian followed, a displeased look on his face. Fingerprint scan, elevator straight to the top floor. Beep. The door opened. A wave of cold, empty, dusty air hit him. Paul froze in the entryway. It was too quiet. So quiet he could hear his own heartbeat, each thud heavy and unsettling. His eyes scanned the room. In the huge fish tank, A few expensive arowana swam listlessly. Asher used to take meticulous care of them. Asher loved raising arowana, and he loved hanging a calligraphy scroll in the living room with the words, "The sky's the limit." The calligraphy. He looked up. The sky's the limit scroll on the living room wall was gone. Asher had sworn that he would have that scroll hanging in his home for the rest of his life. Paul's heart sank. Panic, like a cold viper, coiled tightly around his heart. He walked into the kitchen and yanked open the refrigerator door. A blast of cold air hit him. It was no longer stuffed full. All of Asher's things, the yogurt, the fruit, the pre-cut meal preps, the slow-cooked soups were all gone. Only a few bottles of expensive mineral water stood alone on the cold shelf. Paul's gaze locked onto a corner of the top shelf of the fridge. There, all by itself, was a Tupperware container. He remembered that container. It was one Asher used often. It used to be filled with cut fruit. His heart leaped. A faint, pathetic glimmer of hope ignited. He took out the container almost reverently. It was transparent. Inside was not fruit. It was a bowl of cold tofu pudding. It was no longer chilled. A film of water had condensed on the surface, making it look sticky and unappetizing. On the container, there was a small sticky note. On it, in Asher's familiar, neat handwriting, were a few cold, short words. "Paul, a piece of trash like you deserves to eat trashy tofu pudding." Note: the date was exactly 2 weeks ago, the day he told Asher to get lost. Every word was like a blade dipped in ice, stabbing viciously into Paul's heart. The container slipped from his hand, clattering onto the pristine floor. The sticky tofu pudding splattered everywhere, releasing a cloyingly sweet yet rotten smell. The small sticky note fluttered out, landing in the filthy liquid. Like a merciless verdict, Asher was really gone. Gone completely, utterly and completely. He wasn't going to buy him tofu pudding anymore? "Paul, are you really okay?" Julian stood a short distance away, watching the mess on the floor and the devastated Paul. He frowned, a hint of detachment and scrutiny in his eyes. Just then, ding! Paul's phone suddenly chimed. It was the notification sound for a priority contact. He lunged for the phone as if it were his last lifeline, scrambling to pick it up. It wasn't from Asher. It was a message from his agent, Chris. It was just one short line, but it struck Paul like a bolt of lightning, shattering his soul. "Paul, it's over. It's a disaster. You've been blacklisted across the entire internet. All the brands are demanding compensation. All your previous movies and TV shows have been taken down. The directors are going crazy, saying they're going to kill you. Seriously, man, we're finished." The statement came from the Vance Corporation. When the Vances speak, who dares to defy them? Blacklisted? All his work taken down? This wasn't just being shelved. This was a complete and total erasure of Paul Grant from the entertainment industry. Without a trace. "No, impossible." Paul screamed, his eyes bloodshot. He was a Triple Crown, a list actor. He had tens of millions of fans. He was a favorite of investors. Why? Was it Troy Vance? All for that bastard Asher? He frantically refreshed his own social media page. It was blank. Account does not exist. He clicked on the page for one of his starring films, 404 not found. He searched his own name. All that came back was content cannot be displayed due to relevant laws and regulations. He really was blacklisted. Everywhere. Completely. A massive wave of fear and disbelief, like a giant, icy hand, seized his throat. The throne he was so proud of, the career he had spent half his life building, had crumbled to dust. Just then, his phone began to vibrate violently. It was an endless stream of calls from media outlets and industry contacts like death warrants. Paul fumbled to answer, but the phone slipped and fell to the floor with a clatter. The screen was still lit, and in the notification bar, a new trending topic had shot to #1 with rocket speed. Julian's studio statement: relationship with Paul Grant is strictly platonic. Paul jerked his head up and looked at Julian, who was standing a short distance away. Julian was also looking at him, phone in hand. The warmth and concern were gone from his face, replaced by a cold indifference and a desperate need to distance himself. He gave Paul an extremely official, apologetic smile and said clearly, "Paul, you saw the Vance family's stance. We should probably keep our distance. I hope you resolve your troubles soon." "Why? Julian, didn't you say you came back because you love me? Because you couldn't forget me? Didn't you say you wanted to marry me?" Julian scoffed. "Paul, when you were a superstar actor, I loved you. But what are you now? You're blacklisted everywhere. As much as I love you, I still have to live, don't I? Can you stop being so selfish? You know I came back for your money. Can you still give me money now? Give me $100 million right now, and I promise I won't leave. You're an A-list actor. How can you be so stupid? I put on a little act, and you believed it? You're an actor yourself, for God's sake. Couldn't you tell I was acting?" After he finished, Julian didn't even wait for Paul to react. He turned, strode to the door, pulled it open, and walked out without a backward glance. The door slammed shut with a bang. The apartment was filled with a deathly silence. A mess of tofu pudding on the floor. The ice-cold blacklisting notice. The sweet tofu pudding had gone completely cold. His throne had collapsed. The knockoff he had cast aside like a worn-out shoe had become someone he could never hope to reach. Asher really was something else, climbing into Troy Vance's bed so quickly. Didn't he say he'd loved him since he was a child? Didn't he say he only entered the industry for him? Didn't he say he would love him until he died? And in just 2 weeks, he had attached himself to another man? And he just stood by and watched that other man bully him? Didn't he used to say that if Paul so much as broke a nail, he'd be heartbroken to death? And what was the deal with Julian? Didn't he say he came back to get back together with him? Julian was supposed to be so pure, so innocent, so wonderful. How could he possibly abandon him the moment he got into trouble? Liars. They were all liars. Leaked audio. Paul Grant privately calls co-star a pig. Paul Grant tax scandal. Shady contracts behind sky-high paychecks. Proof. Paul Grant bullied newcomers. Forced director to recast role. Paul Grant abused staff on set. Crew member gives tearful account. One shocking headline after another, like precisely targeted bombs, obliterated Paul's already crumbling virtuous artist persona. In the audio recordings, his mean, vicious insults were bone-chilling. On the tax documents, the clear numbers and signatures were shocking. The video of a crew member's tearful accusation ignited a nationwide firestorm. The fans who had once put him on a pedestal instantly turned on him, hitting back harder than anyone. The ex-fans' leaking dirt accounts were flooded with submissions, all solid evidence and heartbroken breakup letters to their former idol. The general public was furious. Trash. Get out of the industry. Audit his taxes. Send him to jail. Paul attempted a desperate last stand. Using a newly created burner account, he posted a long, rambling essay full of holes, painting himself as a victim and hinting he was being persecuted by powerful forces, trying to rally his remaining fans. Paul's burner. The innocent have nothing to fear. Tall trees attract the wind. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a reason. Thank you to everyone who still believes in me. The darkness will pass. Beneath the post, a few die-hard fans wailed, "We believe you, Paul." And the elite are so cruel. But they were quickly drowned out by a tsunami of angry replies. Innocent my ass. Was it a ghost calling that actress a pig on the recording? Are the tax documents fake? The official seals are fake too. The crew member was forced to cry by the elite? Where's your shame? This disgraced celebrity still dares to show his face? Good riddance. Mr. Vance did a great job, taking out the trash for the public. His attempt to play the victim didn't win him any sympathy. Instead, it was like pouring cold water on a vat of hot oil, blowing up in his face. He completely torched what little public goodwill he had left, becoming a reviled pariah. When a wall is about to collapse, everyone gives it a push. Victims and partners who had previously been afraid to speak out due to his superstar status now came forward to land their own blows. Lawsuits for breach of endorsement contracts flew in like snowflakes. His assets were quickly frozen. His once golden throne had completely collapsed, leaving behind nothing but a mess and astronomical debt. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse were spotlessly clean. I stood by the window, holding a cup of warm black tea, looking down at the ant-like cars and pedestrians below. Troy sat on the sofa behind me, his laptop on his knees, his fingers tapping lightly on the keyboard as he worked. He would occasionally look up at me, his gaze deep and calm. The liquidation report for Paul's assets is out. He's insolvent. The deficit is huge. His properties and collections will be forcibly auctioned off soon. But it's just a drop in the bucket. Those sky-high endorsement penalties, he'll be paying them off for the rest of his life. He spoke calmly, his voice devoid of emotion. I hummed a quiet hum and took a sip of tea. The warm liquid slid down my throat but couldn't warm the frozen wasteland in my heart. Are you sure you can let him go? After this, even if Paul doesn't die, he won't last long. Troy asked in a leisurely tone. Was this guy jealous? I put down my tea, walked over to him, and sat on his lap, facing him. I wrapped my arms around his neck and said deliberately, Troy, my love, thank you for curing my blindness. Troy smiled, then leaned in for an urgent kiss. But just then, the intercom rang. The voice of the downstairs security guard came through, tinged with difficulty. Mr. Sterling, down here, a Mr. Paul Grant wants to see you. He's very agitated. We can't stop him. Every time we try, he says he's going to kill himself. I frowned. Troy also looked up, his eyes turning cold. Let him come up. Some trash you have to take out yourself. Yes, sir. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened. It seemed someone's jealousy was a little hard to appease. Paul was brought up by two large security guards. I almost didn't recognize him. His once perfect hair was greasy and matted. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot, his face covered in stubble. The wrinkled suit he wore was stained with something unidentifiable, reeking of desperation. There was no trace of the Triple Crown actor's glamour. He looked exactly like a homeless man at the end of his rope. When he saw me, he violently broke free from the guards and stumbled toward me. Asher, I know I was wrong. It was all Julian's fault. He was the one who insisted on coming back, on marrying me. Otherwise, we were doing great. I know you still love me. You'll save me, right? I came out for you. I told the world for you. A high-quality man like me, in love with a man like you. You. Paul crawled forward on his knees, snot and tears streaming down his face. A complete wreck. He reached out to grab my pant leg, but I coldly sidestepped him. Crocodile tears? Please, for the sake of our 6 years together, help me. I'll do whatever you want. Just give me a chance to live. If you want, I'll even let you be on top from now on. Okay, 6 years? It wasn't 6 years. I had wasted a full decade. From the day I was 10, when I fell into the river and he supposedly saved me, my eyes went blind, my brain went soft, and I decided I had to have him. But the day I was taken away by my mortal enemy, Troy Vance, I finally learned the truth. The person who saved me all those years ago was Troy. And Troy, that silent man, never said a word. He let me waste 10 years of my life. And now he'll let me be on top? The very sight of you disgusts me. Does it have anything to do with who's on top or bottom? I must have gotten water in my brain when I fell in that river at 10. How else could I have been so blind? Damn it, how did I ever fall for this piece of trash? I looked down at the man groveling at my feet, begging for mercy. I saw the bruise swelling on his forehead as he knocked his head on the floor, and my heart was a block of dead ice. Once he was high and mighty, calling me a knockoff, calling me cheap, telling me to get lost. Now he was kneeling before me like a stray dog, begging me to save his life. How ironic. How disgusting. Paul, you only came begging because you found out who I really am? Then you should also know that the only reason you became an A-list actor is because I, the young master of the Sterling family, was bankrolling your entire career. Did you really think you were that talented? Paul's kowtowing stopped abruptly. He looked up, his face a mask of shock. Get out. I'm busy with my fiancée. You know, it's not good for a man to hold it in at a time like this. You said you'd love me until you died. And now you have a fiancé? I did say I'd love you until I died. Which is why now I want to kill you. And the person who knocked you off your pedestal wasn't my husband. It was me, your trash, not even worthy of him lifting a finger. Troy, who had been standing nearby, came over, wrapped an arm around my waist, and pulled me into his embrace. With his other hand, he cupped my chin, and a stormy kiss descended upon me. Paul, still kneeling on the floor, began to tremble. Someone was jealous. My back was about to break. After that night, I couldn't get out of bed at all. I could only lie on my stomach and scroll through my phone out of boredom. The #1 trending topic had a blazing hot icon next to it, followed by a shocking headline: Asher Sterling, young scion of the Sterling Corporation. Followed closely by Sterling heir bravely enters Hollywood for love. Real-life prince in distress. Paul Grant and Julian have some nerve. Public opinion absolutely exploded. What am I reading? The Sterling Corporation? The insanely rich Sterling family? Young scion? Asher is the Sterling heir? My brain just short-circuited. He entered showbiz for love? Holy crap. What kind of hopelessly romantic prince fairy tale is this? Paul? Julian? You two used the Sterling heir as a stand-in? As a sugar baby? And publicly humiliated him? Blacklisted him? How many goddamn guts did you two eat? Oh my God. For those of us who insulted the young master before, is it too late to kneel and apologize now? So Mr. Vance isn't a new sugar daddy. He's a knight protecting his prince. Paul is done for. Julian is done for. The Sterling family could crush them like ants. Beneath the trending topics, the comments were a mix of shock, worship, apologies, and people frantically tagging Paul and Julian, telling them to await their doom. All of Paul's earlier pathetic essays and scandals now looked like the most absurd jokes. Just as I was getting into it, I saw Troy enter the room out of the corner of my eye. I instinctively pulled the blanket over my ass. Troy Vance, if you dare to again, I'll. Then I saw the bowl of tofu pudding he was carrying. It was savory, with soy sauce, seaweed, and dried shrimp. My eyes lit up. Because that psycho Paul only ate sweet tofu pudding, I hadn't eaten the savory kind in 10 years. I eagerly tried to sit up and eat, but Troy's gaze was heavy. He placed the bowl on the nightstand with one hand and held me down with the other. I'll feed you. Fine by me. I was so tired right now I didn't want to lift a finger. But wait a second. His idea of feeding me didn't involve a spoon. He was feeding me with his mouth. Don't move. If you move again, the tofu pudding will spill out of the corner of your mouth. The savory broth mixed with his clean scent as he fed it to me, so hot my ears turned red. I wanted to protest, to push him away and just eat a proper meal, but my body was traitorously compliant. It took over half an hour to finish one bowl of tofu pudding. I was left breathless. Asher. He murmured my name between our lips, each syllable heavy with an emotion so thick it was tangible. Mine. No flowery words, just that one word, carrying the weight of the world and an undeniable declaration. Mine. My person. My entire world. And just outside this warm, quiet bedroom, in the bustling online world and the cold, cruel reality, a storm of retribution against Paul and Julian was raging with unstoppable force. Once the Sterling Corporation's massive business machine was activated, its efficiency was terrifying. Paul's entertainment company, built on gray areas and shady dealings, was crushed like a rowboat under a giant ship by the Sterling family's precise financial attacks and legal onslaught. It disintegrated overnight. Tax evasion, illegal transactions, coercing artists, one piece of ironclad evidence after another was dug up and sent directly to the relevant authorities. With a single word from the Sterling family, the entire entertainment industry scrambled to comply. No platform, no brand, no production team dared to associate with the fool who had the audacity to treat the Sterling heir as a stand-in and a plaything, and then try to blacklist and humiliate him. All of his endorsements, variety show appearances, and script offers vanished into thin air. The victim persona he had so carefully crafted became an absolute joke in the face of Asher's true identity, proof of his vicious, small-minded nature. Paul was arrested and thrown in jail, no longer the high and mighty A-list actor, but a reviled pariah. Paul's miserable state stood in the most brutal and ironic contrast to Asher, who was being carefully held in Troy's arms in the warm bedroom, enjoying his exclusive feeding service. One struggled and sank in the cold mud, doomed beyond redemption. The other was cherished in gentle love, shining brighter than ever. Troy glanced at a news alert about Paul on his phone screen. His eyes were devoid of emotion, filled only with cold indifference. He casually placed the phone face down on the nightstand as if brushing away a speck of dust. He scooped up a small spoonful of warm, savory tofu pudding, blew on it, and then naturally brought it to my lips. His voice was low and gentle, warm enough to melt ice. "Good boy. One more bite." I obediently opened my mouth. The savory flavor spread across my tongue, a warmth that reached deep into my heart. I looked up and met his focused gaze, which held only my reflection. I couldn't help but smile, murmuring, the savory kind is actually really good." Inside, there was warmth and affection. Outside, the wind and rain raged, and men were like ants. Paul's era, along with his pathetic and laughable ambitions and schemes, was completely buried in this cold, rainy season. And the story of Troy and me had just turned to a brand new, sweet chapter. Epilogue: Troy Vance's perspective. The rain tapped against the window pane, a steady patter, just like that gloomy afternoon 10 years ago. It was a family dinner. Paul was accepting praise from the elders about how he had heroically saved the Sterling family's young master, Asher, from the cold river. But the person who saved Asher was never Paul. It was him, Troy Vance. The memory, like cold river water, instantly engulfed him. That year he was 10, Paul was 15, and Asher was 7. 7-year-old Asher was like a perfect little snowball, the treasure of the Sterling family, and the only light in Troy's bleak childhood. Asher wasn't afraid of his gloomy, silent nature. He always liked to follow him around, calling him Big Brother Troy in his soft voice. That afternoon, he saw Asher playing by the river from a distance, his small figure hopping on the slippery grass. His heart tightened, and he was about to call out a warning when it happened. Asher's foot slipped, and with a scream, he fell into the rushing, icy water. In that moment, Troy's mind went blank. All reason was torn apart by a massive wave of fear. He couldn't swim. He had a bone-deep fear of water. But watching that small, struggling figure sink, hearing the faint cries for help swallowed by the river, his body reacted before his mind could. He charged forward without a shred of hesitation and leaped into the bone-chilling water. The cold enveloped him instantly. Water filled his nose and mouth, and the suffocating feeling of death seized his throat. The immense fear made his limbs go rigid, but the image of Asher struggling helplessly in the water was like a red-hot poker, searing his very soul. He acted on pure instinct, flailing wildly, thrashing closer, using every ounce of his strength to grab Asher's small, flailing hand. The river was deep and fast, pulling them both down. Troy had only one thought: "Don't let go. I can't let go, even if I die." He held onto Asher tightly, kicking with all his might, trying to get their heads above water. The cold river cut at his skin like knives. His lungs burned, and his strength was rapidly fading. Just as he was about to lose hope, his foot seemed to touch a rock at the bottom. He pushed off it hard, using that tiny bit of force to finally break the surface with Asher, fighting his way toward the bank. By the time he dragged the unconscious, ice-cold Asher onto the shore, he himself was on the verge of collapse. He knelt on the bank, gasping for air, a mixture of cold terror and post-rescue relief making him tremble all over. He patted Asher's small face, his voice hoarse and broken. "Asher, Asher, wake up." Just then, he heard footsteps. It was Paul and a few adults who had heard the commotion. Paul was at the front. When he saw Asher lying on the ground and the soaking wet, pathetic Troy, a glint of cunning flashed in his eyes. He immediately threw himself down beside Asher, urgently calling his name and performing a completely incorrect version of first aid. Then, turning to the Sterlings and other family elders who had just arrived, he said in an urgent, shaken voice, "Uncle, Auntie, I saw Asher fall in and jumped in to save him right away. Thank goodness. Thank goodness I made it in time. Troy froze. He opened his mouth, wanting to say that he was the one who saved him. But his throat felt like it was frozen solid. Not a single word would come out. He watched as Paul was surrounded by everyone, showered with gratitude and praise. And him, exhausted, cold, and in shock, his vision went black, and he passed out. When he woke up, the world had changed. The hero who saved the boy was Paul. Everyone praised Paul's bravery and quick thinking. And Troy Vance, who had nearly died from a high fever after jumping into the river, was seen as an irrelevant bystander who was perhaps also rescued by Paul. He also developed severe intermittent amnesia and aphasia. No one believed him. They all told him to get treatment. His family sent him abroad to receive professional care. By the time he returned to the country, 10 years had passed. He had planned to leave Asher alone if he was happy. But then he happened to witness Asher being bullied by Paul. His Asher. How could he let that bastard Paul bully him? Rage instantly became a wildfire, burning down the icy dam he had built over a decade. Who the hell was Paul? An actor who clawed his way up with his looks and shady schemes dared to treat the treasure that Troy Vance had nearly died to save, the person he had cherished from afar for 10 years, as a stand-in, as a plaything? And Julian, that filthy rat. For the first time, a dark, almost destructive killing intent surged in Troy's eyes. In those 10 years, he was no longer the powerless 10-year-old boy who could only watch as his credit was stolen. The resources and power he now commanded were enough to turn the entire entertainment industry upside down. It was time for Paul to disappear from the world of the living. His Asher could finally return to the light. He turned and picked up the bowl of still steaming savory tofu pudding from the table. He knew Asher had loved this as a child. He knew Asher had forced himself to eat sweet tofu pudding for 10 years for that idiot Paul. Pushing open the door, he saw the figure curled up in the soft blankets, and a warmth spread through his heart. 10 years. He could finally walk to him in the open, no longer a voyeur hiding in the shadows. And when Asher saw that bowl of savory tofu pudding, the light that instantly ignited in his eyes was like a star falling into the still lake of Troy's heart, creating a tidal wave. In that moment, all the forbearance, the waiting, the planning, and the decade of pain buried deep in his heart seemed to find redemption. I'll feed you. His voice was raspy and gentle in a way he himself didn't realize. Not with a spoon. He leaned down, took a mouthful of the warm, savory pudding, and then, without room for refusal, passed it to him. He felt Asher's stiffness, and he also felt him gradually soften. This wasn't just feeding him. It was a declaration of ownership, a way of using the most intimate act to erase every trace that idiot Paul had left, rebranding him with his own mark, the mark of Troy Vance. I think I'm falling for you. Asher's voice made all the noise, hatred, and scheming recede like the tide. All that was left was the person in front of him. After 10 years of walking alone in the dark, he finally saw the dawn. He could barely control the strength in his arms. He wanted to crush him into his embrace, meld him into his bones, and never be separated again. Mine. He branded him with the deepest mark between their lips. The wind and rain continued outside, but he couldn't care less about Paul's tragic fate. That was just taking out the trash. A decade of undercurrents had finally come to an end, and his little prince was now safely anchored in his harbor. This time he would never let go, and he would never let anyone hurt him, not even a little. The lost time, the stolen memories, he would spend every day of the rest of his life making up for it, and more.